Matthew 26, verse 1 to 4. If you have a Bible on you, I welcome you to open it. Matthew 26, verse 1 to 4 says this: When Jesus had finished saying these things, he said to his disciples, "As you know, Passover begins in 2 days, and the Son of Man will be handed over to be crucified." At that same time, the leading priests and elders were meeting at the residence of Saskatoon, the high priest, plotting to capture Jesus secretly and killing him. So Jesus knows that he's being handed over to die. Something you must know, that Jesus himself, who is God, understands that he had come to this earth to die. Jesus did not come to this earth to live, but he came to die for his people, and his people are you. As this narrative develops, Jesus gathers with the disciples for the Lord's Supper, which we call communion, and Jesus then predicts that his disciples will not be faithful to him as we probably had thought. First, Jesus tells Peter that he will deny him 3 times, and his followers will fall asleep in a garden where Jesus asks them to pray. They also fall asleep 3 times. Note that number 3. So Jesus is betrayed by one of his own disciples, Judas, who, by the way, deeply regrets what he did, and Jesus is trialed by court by his own people, the Jews, and Pontius Pilate they're brought to. The Roman governor, who is Pontius Pilate, was known as a harsh man, but he even realized that Jesus was an innocent man. The word says this: Pilate responded, "Then what should I do with Jesus, who is called the Messiah?" They shouted back, "Crucify him." "Why?" Pilate demanded. "What crime has he committed?" The mob roared even louder. "Crucify him." Pilate saw that he wasn't getting anywhere and that a riot was developing. So he sent for a bowl of water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, "I am innocent of this man's blood. The responsibility is yours." We learn Pilate has this bowl of water showing he actually disagrees with this decision, but he still allows the people to kill Jesus. So we see from here, Jesus is ordered by death on a cross. Jesus gets hit by whips, and he is then called to carry his own cross, which he will get killed on. It is public humiliation at its finest. And then he gets put on a cross. And what it means is you're nailed to a cross like a lowercase t, and you are just left to hang. What happens is you slowly die and you lose your breath, and everything in your body will eventually shut down. It is known as one of the most excruciating ways to die in life. So as Jesus is ordered to death, he is slowly dying, and he says these last words: "At noon, darkness fell across the world until 3 o'clock. At about 3 o'clock, Jesus called out with this loud voice, 'Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani,' which means, my God, why have you abandoned me?" And then Jesus shouted out again, and he released his spirit. At that moment, in the curtain of the sanctuary, the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook, rocks split apart, the tombs were open, the bodies of many godly men and women who had died there at Jerusalem had appeared to many people. The Roman officer and the soldiers of the crucifixion were terrified at the earthquake of what happened, and they said this man truly was the Son of God. So we learn that Jesus died. And then after we learn someone put a spear through his chest, as noted in other gospels, then water and blood came out separately, which means there was no life left in Jesus. In fact, medical scholars write about this, saying that the fact that the blood and water coming out separately does indeed know that Jesus' heart was entirely dead and no longer functioning. God, Jesus, is put to death by his own people, but yet he died for every single person on this earth. And I must say this: Jesus' death is not an emotional experience that we ride for 2 hours. It is meant to change the trajectory of our life. What if I told you that Jesus knew he had to voluntarily die, and he had specifically you in mind as he did? How would that make you feel? Because God created you, and he does not work on our timeline, he can see everything at once, and he can see into the future as well. So this means when Jesus died, he specifically had you in mind when he died. Tim Keller puts it this way: The cross is not simply a lovely example of sacrificial love. Throwing your life away needlessly is not admirable. It is wrong. Jesus' death was only a good example if it was more than an example. If it was something that was absolutely necessary to rescue us, well, it was. Why did Jesus have to die in order to forgive us? There was a debt to be paid, and God himself paid it. There was a penalty to be borne, and God himself bore it. Forgiveness is always a form of costly suffering. You see, God is so loving that he came to die and suffer for you. Every single one of you. To think that someone has sacrificed their life for us is so powerful. But that is not the end.